Hey everyone, welcome to Figuring Out Fabric, where I ask dumb questions and you get smart answers. And I'm really excited to have Ellen Burns on the what's your Burns Johnson. I'm sorry, I almost missed the hype. I apologize. Um, but I'm so excited to have Ellen Burns Johnson on the show because one of the things when I started this show that I decided is it wasn't just going to be the same kind of 12 people that you hear all the time on this. And Ellen's a really kind of outside source because she's an expert on learning and design. And we worked together on a project that was kind of game-based. I mean, you can describe it better than me, but game-based instructional design for Azure Synapse, Azure Data
Mhm.
Factory, and Power BI.
Yeah.
And so it was really interesting, I think, for her to see someone like me who's supposed to be a tech expert, but talking to this instructional design. I made a scoring rubric that
Yeah.
out of nowhere, and her just coming from the communication and design kind of aspect. And so trying to work together was an interesting project. So I'm really excited to hear her thoughts about the situation of what do you do when you have a technology like Fabric and your organization needs to learn it?
Yeah. Wow. Well, Eugene, I'm super happy to just get to talk to you,
Yeah.
and also you're gonna get a podcast episode out of it. So,
It's free money.
I
It's free
I
money,
love
baby.
it when stuff like that lines up. Um, the game that we worked on was pretty cool. You know, multiplayer. I think that was the intended
Yeah,
end
you
state of
had
it.
3 different roles and you could
Yeah.
kind of go down your own path and then you came back together as a team. And it's so funny because, we'll talk about it with Fabric, but they're trying to do the same thing, but in the real world. They're trying to say, all right, everyone's at the same kitchen table and you all have to work together, the same control panel and make one tool. And I don't know, that seems kind of hard. They've got, but instead of 3 personas, it's like 5 now. So
Yeah.
it's challenging. It's a big moonshot in my opinion.
Yeah, and so one of the things, because I'm not in the data world, all
Yeah.
all that I know about data, I learned from Eugene. Um,
For
not
better or for
entirely true,
worse, right?
but mostly true. Um,
Cool.
and I'm not at all
Yeah,
in
yeah.
the weeds. I'm not building data solutions on the regular, and even if I am, they're very much like light things towards the end of the pipeline, right?
Yeah.
I'm not doing data cleanup. I am making reports.
Yeah.
Or I'm telling someone else to make a report, right? So sometimes I'm outside the pipeline. I'm just the person who turns it on.
You're
Um,
yeah, no, there's a faucet and you know how to turn it on, you know how to wash your hands or make some soup, but you have like
yes.
there's an analogy. There's a gentleman called Scott Hanselman who works for Microsoft in like the C# kind of space, developer evangelist space. And he has this story about his wife did not understand plumbing. Like to
Okay.
her it was an abstraction. Once something went down the sink, it might as well have gone into a black hole. And she dropped a ring down the sink. And to her, it was gone forever. And he was like, "No, no, no, honey, there's a U-bend. We'll just right." But for a lot of people, there that layer of abstraction, they don't know what's beneath it. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
you just know water comes out and I use it, and not necessarily about the plumbing.
Just for future listeners and for safety reasons, don't build black holes into your household infrastructure.
Well, it's expensive
Probably.
too. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, you nudge them the wrong way by just like one tiny bit and
The
everything.
technology will get there. Give it time.
Yeah. Anyway, so the paradigm, and this is so interesting to me because like the paradigm that we worked with when we were working together on this game, and we got really
Yeah.
into the behaviors behind it. You had all this knowledge about how the systems work together and what it takes for the systems to to produce a useful result. And you've had
Right.
a ton of experience in how people need to work together, bringing their different domains of expertise in order to create that. And then I
Right.
did my thing and tried to that into a
You had a
game.
lot of Miro boards, and you looked really
Yes.
smart, and that's about I assume there was something more to it than, like it felt like we were trying to, like, make a text adventure game because there was a lot
Yes.
of arrows and, like, if you go this way and that way, and so I
Yeah.
assume there was more expertise and you weren't just like someone who doodled a lot in high school, so, yeah.
I'm such a bad doodler. So y so I guess that's it. I guess there must be because I'm a bad doodler.
I got it. Noted.
So that's good for me. But anyway, like a lot of what we talked like a lot of what we really worked on in that game was helping people like creating these moments in the story where people had to think about how to communicate with these other roles, right? Like not just
Right.
hooking up the technical piece, that was part of it, but also we had this entire phase of the game where they were doing um requirements gathering, and they were
Right.
actually talking with other characters in the role, of, like, data engineer, data
Th
scientist, or data analyst, and the questions that they had to ask were at really different like, really asking about totally different things, and then,
Yeah.
as an individual player, if you were playing it solo, or as a team, you had to communicate with one another to make to progress the game forward, and as you progress the game, you were also building this fictional platform, this fictional solution.
Right.
It sounds
Learning how
like
to get out of your own head for sure, and then it
yeah.
wasn't it wasn't reflected in the game because it wouldn't have fit with the flow, but I can
Mhm.
tell you from my experience, business intelligence, so more of the front end piece,
Yeah.
is some of the most iterative design in terms of IT projects, the most vulnerable to scope creep, in the sense
Mhm.
that there's an apocryphal quote from Ford that if I'd asked them what they wanted, they would have said faster horses.
Yeah.
My customers are constantly asking for faster horses.
Right.
And so you really do have to like nail that requirements gathering kind of piece because it is super easy that someone says, "Yeah, I want a sandwich." And you make a sandwich, and really what they wanted was to go to a restaurant or to get out or to have some variety, but you never interrogated the why behind their request. And so, yeah, you have to learn to understand the motivations behind a requirement because it's so easy to build the wrong thing in the data
Mhm.
space.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you talked about the pipe or the plumbing analogy in
Yeah.
the episode that you shared with Christina,
Yeah, yeah,
um,
yeah, yeah, that's the
who
first one
has
that's out, yeah.
she has a freaking dragon on her wall, and that's
Yes.
so cool. Like, now I want dragons on my
Someday you
walls.
can be that cool, I promise, I believe in you.
Oh, I'll try.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, you had talked about how, like, towards the end of that pipe, like the faucet, there's like a lot of tweaking and people
Yeah,
asking for different
exactly.
amounts of water and they don't and if you just deliver the water, then they might come back and be like, I needed more water. Or the water wasn't the right temperature. Or
Right.
I
Yeah,
needed
yeah, yeah.
less water. Or this is the wrong water. And you have to be like, I don't understand what you mean. um yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
100%. Yep, exactly.
Okay. So the interesting thing to me about fabric, and I'm thinking in terms of analogies because
No, no, no,
that's
we're
all
on
I
the
can do.
same wavelength, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm constantly using analogies to explain this stuff.
It's like Microsoft is trying to, like, like, product away the communication layer between those different roles, and
Yes.
that's just me in my very early, like, very nation beginner's mind perspective, but that's kinda what it seems like they're trying to do with Fabric. Is that a good way of thinking about it, or am I really missing the boat with that?
Um, I think that's half true. So,
Okay.
I think some of that's already happening in the industry, and
Sure.
Microsoft is trying to catch up. But I would say that what you will find is there's been a pattern going on over time around the idea of big data. And you and I both deal with small data, so it's hard to relate to that. But
Mhm.
one of the things that has happened, the way that I like to think about big data, there's a blog post by I think Mother Duck because they have a product called DuckDB or something like that, fun name. Um, that talks about big data is dead. And there's this great quote that really made the light bulb go off for me. Big data is when it's cheaper to just keep everything than to figure out what to get rid of. And if
Hmm.
you look at the price of storage, like I'm sure you played video games on like DOS or Windows 95 and a 10 gigabyte hard drive was huge.
Huge.
And now I literally in my Nintendo Switch, we have a terabyte SD card that
Yeah.
fits on my pinky now, right?
Yeah.
And so there's been a kind of movement of how do we structure the data in such a way to take advantage of this? When storage is cheap, when ink and paper is infinitely cheap,
Mhm.
how is that going to change your writing process? How is that going to change your novel process? because a lot of the way that databases are designed are very much from that storage is expensive era where you don't want any duplication because it's really expensive. Ink is expensive, paper is expensive. So there's been some of this going on in general, but I agree the conceit of Fabric is trying to kind of software as a service away that communication piece. So for the storage layer, that's already been happening outside in the sense that trying to put everything into one file format in one space. But it really does feel like they are trying to get everyone at the same kind of kitchen table. And I think there's
Hmm.
a layer where it may backfire because when I was a kid, we would have Thanksgiving and they'd pull out the card table and us kids would be at the kids table. And I think people who are used to Power BI are really, really frustrated right now because they feel like they've been given the kids table and they're trying to be sold the kitchen table for Thanksgiving, if that makes sense.
Hmm. Right. So they're paying kitchen table prices for kids'
Yeah,
table
yeah, yeah.
experiences. Got it.
Yeah, there's been so I'll give you a good example. There was on Reddit, there was a lot of frustration about the most recent Power BI update. So it was a monthly update. And there were some interesting features, but then, a lot of I don't know where I feel about this, but a lot of people feel that the number of updates for Power BI has slowed, that a lot of it's gone into this other stuff with Fabric.
That would make
But you
sense.
look at the
Yeah.
Power BI update page, and the first item is for FabricCon, which ostensibly includes some Power BI stuff, but feels like an advertisement for Fabric. And then the second item is an advertisement for the DP 700 certification, which is a Fabric certification, which again technically includes some Power BI stuff, but it's much more that data integration kind of piece. And so I do think some people feel like this product that they know and they love and was kind of something that you would be able to use in the sense that, you don't have to have this huge enterprise expertise, this huge infrastructure. It's like Excel, but a little bit different.
Mhm.
That's kind of becoming the redheaded stepchild, and that all of this development effort, all this marketing effort is going to this, like you said, trying to paper over these differences and personas and to have this one tool to kind of rule them all. So I think the frustration is
Hmm.
real. I don't know if it's accurate, but I think it's real.
Yeah, that's interesting. And yeah, that is, hmm. I, I mean, not being part of the user base.
Right, no,
It's
I'm
yeah.
I'm so happy to get an outside perspective because I'm the fish and you're like, "How's the water?" I'm like, "What water?"
Right. Right. Um, it it seems like a hard thing to do, right? Like you had like pretty distinct user personas prior to this paradigm shift.
Yeah,
Um, the thing about I mean, the thing about Power BI, right, is like that is the layer that is closest to the business in terms of
yes,
what they see, right? Like if
100%.
they're gonna right, that's how the rest of the business interacts with this entire pipeline is through the faucet,
It's the faucet, 100%.
right?
Yep,
So the people who are invested in Power BI are the ones who can tell their stories and share their experiences the most with the business.
right.
Whoever that is, they're the
You're
ones
you're you
presumably
you have a
yeah.
bathroom, you have a kitchen, and you're used to using the faucet, you've had great experiences, you like the marble outlay or whatever, and now suddenly your landlord says, "Hey, I need you to take a look at the pipes." And that can be frustrating because you don't wanna be a plumber.
Yeah.
Or maybe, like, I mean, I'm sure you've changed the shower head before, it's fine, it's not hard to do, but I don't wanna, like, mess with pipes in my basement. Like,
Yeah.
I'm worried I'm gonna flood it or something like that, and so, yeah, it really is it is a paradigm shift, or it is a broadening of the expertise that some people will have, myself included, that maybe they didn't feel quite ready for or feel they didn't need.
Yeah. Okay. So now let's step back further.
Yeah,
It's
just
the
zooming
conversation's
out.
hap zooming out, right? So bringing in the kind of the L&D perspective, the big
Yeah,
conversation
please.
right now about in L&D is, of course, about AI because that's just everything.
It's the hype. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's
It's the
unavoidable.
hype. But, one of the things that is exciting is, if you can take steps to create an accurate agent of some sort, that you've
Yeah.
trained it on the right things, then it can
Yeah.
really accelerate an individual human's ability to upskill quickly.
Yes. Yes.
And so, for sure, if you've built habits and methods of working in a specific way, and now the tools have changed in a way that you feel like you have to adapt to, even though you liked what you were doing, that's going to be uncomfortable. And I'm
Yeah.
not saying people shouldn't feel uncomfortable.
Right,
That's
no,
natural.
the
Right,
cheese has been moved for
right.
everyone, and it's difficult.
Yeah, exactly. But I do wonder if the idea that upskilling will be easier and faster going forward, and that more and more learning content and tools
Oh,
will
I
be
see what you're saying.
available to fit that learning in the flow of work means that there's like expectation, at least on Microsoft's like product management part. Maybe they're not thinking about it in these explicit terms, but like, okay, assuming it's gonna be easier than ever to learn about plumbing and solve
Right.
specific plumbing questions and
Yeah,
problems,
yeah, yeah, I see what you're saying.
why
Well,
don't
I
we
mean,
expand it so people can do that? But it sounds
wha
like they're not just doing that, they're also making it more difficult to only focus on the countertop and the you
yeah, I
know
mean, I think, some of it's a maturity and community issue.
Hmm,
So,
okay.
I think the problem right now is people are being presented with, say, a buffet of food for the first time. And the marketing people are saying, "Oh, we've got crab, we've got sushi, we've got roast beef, all this stuff." And you have this poor soul that's used to like McDonald's or Americana,
Mhm.
and you need someone to walk and be like, "Look, it's a lot. Don't worry about the sushi. Don't touch the raw fish. It's fine. Look, we have some mashed potatoes over here. We have some roast beef. You're gonna be okay."
Right.
Um, but the problem is the thing that you sell is all of these big data capabilities, all these sorts of things. So I think over time, um the design patterns will show up where it's like, okay, if you're a small business, here's how you buy the smallest SKU available and then just turn it on and off. And so you're buying like a fraction of it. And here's all these things you can do. But in
Mhm.
terms of the upskilling, that's honestly a good point. I don't know how closely you followed Microsoft's foray into AI, but they have exclusive access to OpenAI,
Mhm.
and they are pretty much all in on
Yep.
artificial intelligence. I mean, you look at every single product, they've got some version of Copilot in there,
Yep.
and the quality varies. Um,
Yes. Which you'd
because
expect.
yeah, well, the thing, I mean, you probably get this, but LLMs depend on a large corpus of text that is high quality, or at least well
Yes.
tagged, right? And so for traditional code, great. They've scraped GitHub. There's the text is there. For certain types of writing, absolutely. For visual design, that's not how LLMs work. So for Power BI, they have a copilot for Power BI. It can technically create a new report, but in reality, it's a very templated sort of report, and then it's kind of
Mhm.
just populating some visuals. It can help you with your code, but the code that's used by Power BI is a very niche domain specific language. And so there's not a large corpus there.
Mhm.
And so it really feels like Microsoft is taking a spaghetti against the wall kind of approach to AI. They see this as an existential opportunity, existential threat, however you want to put it. And so they're putting AI into everything. And I think, it's like being a venture capitalist. A lot of those investments are not going to turn out. But if
Right.
you can have the next Dropbox, because that was a VC backed company or
Yeah.
whatever, you have the potential for 1,000x return on investment, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I think that's how they see it.
Right.
And so I think there is the potential for that because I have customers and I answer way too many questions on Reddit where people will go to ChatGPT first
Yeah.
and say, "How do I write this code in DAX?" And DAX is not an easy language to learn. And AI is getting better at it, but it's not great. But there are plenty of tools where being able to successfully ask AI first would just make life so much easier for this stuff. So the potential's there.
Yeah. And I feel like that's kind of where things are moving, and for the industry I'm in, it's like a huge disruption. This is like
Oh yeah, no, the
yeah.
horse and buggy whip manufacturers are in so much trouble.
Right.
Um, well, and, like, I think so I know technically what you do is nothing like marketing, but in both areas, I mean, there's it's, you are
Trying to get
communicating to individuals using the English language a lot of the time and trying to
well, we're
understand
trying to
your
get
audience.
people to do stuff.
Yeah, 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 right, and the
Yeah.
problem is, in my opinion, as an outsider, I have been utterly disappointed with not only how lazy other humans are, but how low their bar is for the quality of content.
Yeah.
Like, you see people in marketing positions. I I wrote an article about the ethics of AI. You can make an argument, but when people will post a picture, use AI, whatever, that has 6 fingers and you're like, "Ship it." It's so disappointing because what it tells to me is that you don't care about the quality of your work. I've seen multiple articles that I've called out publicly, that's in my post, we'll put it in the show notes, where they would ask, "Hey, ChatGPT, help me with this DAX code." And ChatGPT, because it's an autocomplete, because it's an averager, it would take names of functions from other programming languages or from English and just make them up. So it would like, I'll give you the
Yeah.
perfect example. So the DAX programming language for modeling data is like a honey trap for or honeypot for LLMs because it has function names that have nothing to do with what the function does.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I know. It's one of the most frustrating things about it. I mean, they're doing better, but like some of the initial decisions just made no sense. So I'll give you a good example. There's a function called earliest. What as a normal human being with a grasp of the English language, what do you think, like, imagine like an Excel function called
Yeah.
earliest. What do you think it does?
I mean, maybe it
Guess.
looks at, like, timestamp data and, like, sorts them
You
by
you would
early to
think that
late.
that would be a great implementation.
Oh, no.
So what the earliest function does
Oh,
is,
no.
did you ever watch the movie Inception?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It's functionally as if you wanted to get kicked out to the most outermost layer of the Inception kind of thing, right? So basically, there's stuff you can do that whenever you're doing like a loop, like you would in programming, you can nest those. So
Mhm.
basically, I'm not going to get into it, but you can have these nested contexts, like a little Russian Matryoshka dolls or what have you.
Mhm.
Earliest refers to the outermost context. It has nothing to do with time. It has nothing to do with sorting or like the previous row or any of that kind of stuff. And so there was a blog post that I read that was about the best ways to use earliest. You're not supposed to use this function anymore. It is a worst practice. If I see that in code, I know you don't know how to write good DAX. And the code they recommended was like earliest and then the date and like it made the human interpretation. And someone just posted the blog post. They never tested the code, which physically would not function because you would get a syntax error. And so the whole point is AI is not only massively disruptive for, I don't want to say softer fields like yours, because I think that's used in a derogatory way sometimes, but more human English language, kind of human relational psychological fields like yours and marketing.
Mhm.
Um, But I think we've uncovered that some people have such a low quality bar you could trip over it, and that's really disappointing.
Well, it creates honestly, in this paradigm, in our current state of the world and the way that information is shared, that kind of practice is actively harmful to your community, because
Yeah,
if you are pumping out tons of content, you are feeding that algorithm, and it is happy that you're pumping out tons of content. It will tell other people that this person is great because they make so much content,
yeah.
and if your content is bad,
Quantity over
then it's
quality.
getting picked up as a
The
resource.
Ouroboros has
Right.
started, right?
Right,
Because
and yeah, so, like, if you aren't if you as a content creator of any type, if you're trying to inform people and not just enrage them,
yeah,
like, you owe it to your community to do good work, not just fast work, good
yeah,
work.
that's basically one of the conclusions from my article on AI and ethics. Like, if you're a content creator, you have an obligation to take ownership of anything that's written, anything output by you, but
Yeah.
also to, like, care about quality, and you're right. So there's, an AI that was released by a company called DeepSeek in China, and it's one of the funny things is if you ask the LLM who it is, what it is, half the time it'll say, "Oh, I'm DeepSeek by this company," whatever. Half the time it'll say it's ChatGPT. Now, there's one of two causes for that. Either they broke the terms of yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
For those of
okay.
you listening, Ellen is, like, uncontrollably laughing. We'll put it in the show notes too. But
Ha ha
so
ha. Ha ha ha.
there's yeah, no, the reference, but yeah, I thought of that. Yeah, we'll just put her laughter. Alright, a little wave file. So there's one of two things that could have caused that. One is that they were violating the terms of service of OpenAI, which, I mean, who cares? OpenAI violated everybody's terms of service to get the LM, and they trained on that. It's possible. Another possibility is there was so much AI slop out there
Mhm.
that when they trained on the internet, they trained on ChatGPT.
Yeah.
And so the Ouroboros, the snake, the what is it, a Norse god? I don't know. The snake has eaten its tail and it's just gonna get worse. It
It's just
really
gonna
is.
just like, if a snake actually tried to eat itself, it would turn into a worse snake.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah.
Like, it's not good for the snake,
Yeah.
honestly.
Yeah, it's not
Um,
good for anyone.
no, it's really not good for anyone. So, that's a whole, like, how you extract the snake from
Yeah,
itself,
yeah.
which is actually this is something that happens. Sometimes snakes eat their own
Oh,
tails, and
no. Oh
you
my
have to,
god.
like I've there are videos on it. Go do your own Googling. We're not gonna link it in the
We've
show
got about
notes.
another 5 minutes. Is there any other kind of questions or anything else you want to bring up about any of this stuff?
Oh, yeah, yeah, we should
Because we
probably
could
get off
spend 2
the
hours talking. I mean,
about
this is how we are.
snakes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so give me a second, and I'm not sure if you're gonna be able to cut this out or how much editing you do.
Oh, no, you're fine.
Okay, well, kinda coming back to the point we were talking about, where we talked about how maybe maybe the assumption on Microsoft's part is, yes, our user base is gonna go through some discomfort, but
Mm,
as we are able to more, effectively integrate AI as a learning tool
yeah.
into our platform, then the friction between these different perspectives will be lessened because of how easy it will be to just like, "Okay, all right, I like working with the countertops. I do have to think about the pipes for just a second. I don't
Yeah.
know exactly what I'm doing, but I can ask the AI coach. It'll tell me what I need to do and I can figure it out."
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, maybe I wonder if they're headed in that direction. Um, but we haven't seen a ton of that, like, on a very large, very robust scale. Sure,
No.
every app right now has an AI chatbot you can ask
Yeah.
questions of it,
No,
and so many of them are just patently useless. So
yeah. I agree with you. I think we're still in the spaghetti on the wall kind of stages, and they're making an effort, but the problem is, so if you go, read the documentation for Azure OpenAI, so Microsoft's kind of version of AI, you can read about how, I don't know how familiar you are with the ways that you can train an LLM, but the kind of hello world of it is called RAG. It's like retrieval augmentation something, but it's kind of like just grabbing pieces of paragraphs of text and shoving it into the prompt. But you can also actually train the model. You can say, "Here's the
mhm,
model. Here's a prompt, and here's what you should have answered."
yeah,
And I'm sure they're doing that, but from the documentation, you need hundreds or thousands of examples for that to be successful.
mhm,
And so I think that is not a small task.
no,
It is not a small task. If you truly want to upskill, if you want Chris in accounting, who's an Excel master, is comfortable with Power BI, and knows just enough SQL querying language for databases to be dangerous, because I've worked with folks like that. They're great people. Um, you have this person, you're trying to upskill them to go further upstream to, start learning the plumbing. It is not an easy task to come up with hundreds or thousands
mm-mm,
of question and answer examples
right.
to tune that model. It just really isn't.
What's fascinating is the processes that you are describing are exactly the same way that humans learn.
Sure.
And the first that you described is just like tacit experience, no structured instruction. You're just picking things up as you go. And
Yeah.
yeah, you need a lot of examples to get the right stuff, right? To
Yeah.
get to the right kind of performance. When I say performance, I mean like behavior. The second that you described is like a formal instruction, and you still need a lot of examples to get to the right performance, which
Yeah.
doesn't often happen in the way that we teach people. It's one of the reasons why education has been in need of reform for ages and ages, because we just teach
Yeah.
content, not like examples, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
a
Have
different
you
podcast.
heard,
But yeah.
what is it? The idea, the term a wicked learning environment?
Yes. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. So for
Yes,
anyone who doesn't
exactly.
know, we'll find the link, we'll put it in there, but there's the idea of a kind learning environment is like,
Mhm.
let's say, maybe chess or something where you have an immediate feedback loop.
Yep.
And a wicked learning environment is, say, like social skills, which I had none of, where you might say something at a party and offend your Aunt Carol and not hear about it for 6 months. So the
Right.
feedback loop is very loose and very diffuse, but the
Yep.
consequences of making Aunt Carol mad are severe. And so, yeah, a lot of learning environments are not, "Hey, you got this wrong. Here's what," it's, "Hey, you failed at this unspoken set of rules
Right.
and company politics, and you've been laid off because you didn't know to suck up to this one person."
Right.
So, yeah,
Carol, you didn't know this, but Carol can put you back at the kids' table
yeah.
for a long time. Yeah, no, kind and wicked, right, kind and wicked, and video games are kind learning environments.
Yes,
Some of them
yes,
are hard,
ideally, most video games
but
are kind environments where you get immediate feedback, you get a klaxon that goes off when you get hit.
and consistent results, right?
Yes, because it's predictable. Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, the exception are, like, masochists who wanna play roguelikes or play, like, Dark Souls or these kinds of things where difficulty or unpredictability is the point, but a lot of times it's like, I press the A button, I jump, and you know from experience with human beings, social interactions are not, I press the A button, I jump, unless you're a sociopath or a narcissist. So, and even then.
yeah, yeah.
Well, cool. Well, we're well over 30 minutes, as fun
Oh,
as
right,
this
we
is.
definitely are.
Yeah, that's fine.
So much fun, though.
Um
Yeah.
So let's kinda wrap up. So the normal first 2 questions don't work because you don't really use Fabric, which is fine, but, so what's a tool or feature in kind of the work that you do? Like, say, maybe Miro, because I know you use that a lot. That's, like, one of your favorites.
Ooh, a feature in a tool that I use a lot.
Or just a tool, like a piece of software or something, or
So,
even an approach. Good.
yeah, well, the thing that I actually like about I'm just gonna combine a couple things.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I am really a fan, what I'm exploring a lot right now is kind of, it's like taking the idea of what streamers do and bringing it into working in, like, working situations. So,
Okay.
like, the idea of not necessarily co-working, but, like, the rubber duck idea where, like, you're partnering
Y
or you're pair programming or
Yeah,
something like
yeah.
that.
So
Yeah,
in ADHD terms, it's called body doubling.
body
With
doubling, yep.
autism, there's the idea of parallel play. So, like some sort of synchronicity can really help us because we're social animals, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what I've been trying to do that is, I do a fair number of webinars like for work where we talk about different things, and I've been
Yeah.
experimenting with bringing that into the webinar when you're got like 600 people.
Yeah.
And tools like Miro or Mural, which sound the same but they're different products. Um, uh, have been a really fun way to experiment with that because you can bring in a bunch of guests, maybe not
Yeah.
600, and you can
Oh,
ask
that's
people like to
fascinating.
move things around.
You're
And so it's this fun way of like co-creating meaning
you get to
together.
do, Twitch plays Pokemon, but it's like graphic design.
Exactly,
That's
exactly. Or
awesome.
let's do some analysis together. And one of the things is to bring it back to the topic of the podcast.
Yeah, right.
One of the things I'm excited about when it comes to just data tools in general and how they are evolving to maybe be more accessible to just,
Yeah.
data dumb people like me is we can start working on that together. So you can like really accelerate
Oh,
the
yeah.
faucet, like the
Yeah,
work in
right.
the kitchen. Yeah. And I think when people are involved in creating the data that insights are derived from, they are more invested in what those insights tell them, even if it's an uncomfortable conclusion.
Yes.
And I think we are in a world where because we have so much information thrown at us, we have to be just more willing and to
Yeah.
quickly jump into emotionally uncomfortable territory.
Yeah, no, I
So,
agree with you.
yeah.
At my last job, when I started out, one of the things that was difficult for me is I was basically a car mechanic to my coworkers because I would go in my head, I would fix their problem and I'd go through these like MacGyver-esque gymnastics to solve the problem, and I'd be like, "So do you wanna know how I fixed it, or you just wanna know it's fixed?" And they'd be like, "I just wanna know that it's fixed." And I was like, "Okay, cool." And, like, it was a little demoralizing, but I do think you're right that if people have a better understanding of how the sausage is made, they're gonna care more about food quality, right? I mean,
Yeah.
the this is a huge aside, and I should probably avoid politics on this podcast, but there was a book we read in sociology called The Jungle by Upton Sinclair.
I was just thinking about the jungle when you were
Yeah, yeah,
talking about that.
and it was
Yes.
supposed to be this kind of socialist manifesto, and it was so hilarious because it did not go the way he wanted. He's quoted as saying, "I aimed for America's heart, and I hit their stomach instead."
Yeah.
He wanted to bring about socialism, and he brought about food reform, which is just
Also important.
hilarious to me. Yeah. I'm
Yeah.
glad we have food reform, but
Yeah, I don't want sawdust in my sausage
yeah,
or
right, weird.
rats, honestly.
But you're right. If people know a little bit more about how the product is
Mm.
made, they're gonna care
Yeah.
a little bit more about the quality and maybe communicate better with the people who are working further upstream.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome. I
Yep.
guess the last question, there's way too many social media networks. Where can people find you? Is there anything you wanna promote or plug or anything like that?
Yeah, so I am pretty much only on LinkedIn right now. I've
Okay.
been thinking about doing Blue Sky. I don't like having a huge link tree like yourself because it just
Yeah,
seems
I'm
like a
not
lot of
I
work.
s look, I do it for a business.
Yeah,
I would ignore half of these social media networks if it wasn't part of my job, but Blue Sky's
exactly.
been Blue Sky's been popping off in terms of the data community, so I've been happy
Yeah.
about that. It feels like
Um,
2011 era Twitter, so
yeah, I am in the process of deleting my Twitter account.
yeah, and I know a lot of
So
people are.
they
Yeah,
just are taking their time giving me my data. Anyway, but yeah, so yeah, LinkedIn is where you can find me. It's
okay.
easy to find me because I have a long name that isn't
Yeah,
hard to
you
remember.
got the hyphen.
Yeah, I got
I
that. Oh, yeah.
I've got a long name, I just don't tell people my true name because 'cause I'm like a dragon. Once you know my 2 middle names, then you have control over me, so
Right, and
yeah.
they can summon you at will, and you don't have
It's
time for
really
that.
awkward if I'm in a meeting. Yes.
Yeah. Ah.
Alright. Well, very cool. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure to hang out with you, Ellen, and hopefully the audience learned something. If not, that I don't care. We got to hang out, so
Yeah, exactly. It was really great to be on. Thanks for setting this up.
thanks.